Hello class. In this lecture we're going to be talking about something fairly unique to the piano. In fact, piano is one of the instruments that we often associate with this ability. And it's an ability that many instruments that we know of cannot perform. If we think of a violin, or we think of a trumpet, or a flute, or a cello, or what have you, oboe, bassoon, right? Many instruments, they do not have the capability of playing more than 2 or 3 notes at once. And on the piano, we can. And in this lecture, we're going to be discussing chords. And chords are crucial to piano playing because oftentimes in piano music, the left hand will accompany, in other words, back up the right hand. And to give you an example of that, if we were to take a simple melody that we've been working with, that'd be something a violin would play or other melodic instrument that would play, but the left hand has the capability of doing much more. We're able to play multiple notes at once. So we can essentially accompany or back up the melody. Right? We hear this kind of piano playing all of the time. In fact, most piano music written nowadays is written for left-hand accompaniment with right-hand melody. And in fact, the role of piano in most musical ensembles outside of classical music is strictly a harmonic support instrument. In other words, it plays chords to fill in the space between the melody up here and the bass line, which is normally covered by an electric bass. The piano plays chords. We can hear it in a really famous song that we know about. Don't Stop Believin' by Journey, right? The piano does not have a melody in that piece of music. It does, however, have chords. And that is the topic of today's lecture. Chords are nothing more. The definition of a chord is 3 or more notes played simultaneously. Playing chords is actually far simpler than playing scales or playing a melody. So let's talk about what a chord looks like in a piece of music. Chords, I tell my beginning piano students that chords, when written correctly, look like a snowman. And they do. They do look like a snowman. 3 notes stacked on top of one another. Now we need to find a way of how to label these chords. Well, oftentimes you might hear in movies or music videos, things like that, you'll hear someone discussing a C chord or an F chord or a G chord. All they're telling you is to play that chord, and they're labeling it by looking at the very bottom note that's in the chord. The bottom note in this chord is C. Therefore, it's a C major chord. The bottom note in this chord is F. And the bottom note in this chord is G. Therefore, this is an F chord, this is a G chord, right? This is why it's important to know the names of the notes on the staff so we can read these chords. So let's play these chords right now. Great. They sound nice. They sound pretty. What we need to remember also is that chords are played with specific fingering. 1, 3, and 5. Meaning that we do not use these 2 fingers. We use thumb, middle finger, and pinky. 1, 3, 5. How do we figure out chords? Well, if I were to tell you that I want you to play a C major chord, an easy way to figure out the C major chord, there's multiple ways to do this. I'll teach you 2 ways, 2 very simple ways to figure it out. Well, if someone asks you to play a C major chord, let me show you on the piano here. If someone asks you to play a C major chord or a piece of music calls for a C major chord, obviously we're going to play C. We're going to skip a note, play E, skip a note, play G. Played with first finger, third finger, fifth finger. 1, 3, 5. There's our C major chord. If someone asked you to play an F major chord, well, you would start with F because it's an F major chord. Play F, skip that note, play this note, skip this note, play this note. 1, 3, 5. Likewise with a G. Play a note, skip a note, play a note, skip a note, play a note. There's your G major chord. The other method in which that we can define chords is I've written down here. If we want to know how to play a C major chord, well, we take the first 5 notes of a C major scale and we play that note, we play that note, and we play that note. We cross out that note and that note and that note. Let me show you here on this board. There we go. We play the first note of the scale, the third note of the scale, and the fifth note of the scale. And then if we were to stack these all together, if I move these over on the board, it would stack the chord like this. A C major chord. And how we spell that out is capital C, capital M-A-J-O-R. C major, right? So, in this video, I'm going to just review all of the chords that we have discussed, essentially in relationship to their scales. So, we figured out the C major chord, and we figured out the G major chord, didn't we? Let's go ahead and take a moment to figure out the D major chord. Remember, D major has 2 sharps in it. An F sharp and a C sharp. And here are our first 5 notes in the D major scale, right? We might sit there and say, oh, well, if I just move my hand up from C major and move it up 1 note, the whole hand, there's my D chord. Not the case. Does this sound like a happy chord? Yeah. Does this sound like a sad chord? Yeah, it sounds a little darker, right? More melancholic, right? Well, that's because I'm not playing the correct notes. So in D major, we know that there's an F sharp. In fact, all Fs are sharp. So therefore, this note right here, this F, must be sharped. Let's go ahead and look at that on the piano. D, F sharp, A. 1, 3, 5. Because our first 5 notes of the D major scale are this: D, E, F sharp, G, A. So F sharp is included in this chord. Let's go to A major. A, C sharp, E. And now let's go to E major. E, G sharp, B. A major, E major. So we can see that D major, A major, and E major all have our third finger raised to an altered note, a sharped note. Feel free to rewind this video, watch any part of it, copy what I'm doing, replay to try to understand this material. As always, if you have any questions, text me or email me. We'll get through this. Until then, take care.